Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Thursday, September 4th. 2025, time to get ready and go at the same time for yet another show. Well, what can I tell you? We're back, and I guess, I don't know, I haven't heard that Trump was dead this morning, but it's something that everybody wakes up and checks on their phone. I think everybody feels the same way about that one, but we have more update on the examination of his health background. Greg tells me there's yet more that is worth adding to the story. Yesterday also gave us, hey, what do you know, another Jeffrey Epstein round of stories. Very interesting to see President Trump launch military honors in tribute to Jeffrey Epstein. Odd choice. Wouldn't have guessed it was going to happen, to do a military flyover of Washington, D.C., in honor of Epstein and I guess possibly his accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell, although I wasn't entirely sure whether the flyover was really for her. We experienced a very odd phenomenon of everybody on social media and elsewhere discussing the whole thing as, well, it was scheduled as an interruption of the big press conference yesterday. I think it's fair game to say, well, although no one can think of a good reason for it, no prompting event of any kind, it seems clear that the president is just going to have to accept that everybody will view this as military honors for serial pedophile and former best friend Jeffrey Epstein, which is, again, an odd choice for a president leading a party into contentious midterm elections. But that's the way I'm going to view it, and I don't know. I guess I'd challenge you to come up with another reason for having it, if you think that isn't the reason. I know that widely circulated speculation was, well, it will interrupt the press conference. Well, do you know how long it takes a jet to go overhead? Not a lot of time. And so what you do is you hear jet noise, as you frequently do because you're near major airports. You wait, and then you continue with your press conference. And everybody who's interested in the press conference then listens to what you have to say after the planes are gone. They don't circle around. They don't strafe the press conference. They don't drop bombs or leaflets or anything of the sort. They come and they go. So there's really no other way to interpret it but that it was in honor of Jeffrey Epstein, which really seems like a bit of an outrage. And I don't know why people are refusing to allow themselves to be outraged about it properly, in my view. Okay, well, lots of other things to round up. Lots of action in the courts. Not that Trump cares about them. There's only one court he cares about until it crosses him. And then at that point, he won't care about that court either. But it'll be interesting to watch what other people think when he defies their dictates. And Greg Dworkin has been busily rounding them up. And I'm trying to think, what would be a fun way of playing you in that we haven't used yet? Oh, I don't know. Let's see. This one, of course, we used that one yesterday. Have we used this one yet? We'll borrow one from the movies here. Ooh. Ethereal. All right, Greg, you've won the Oscar. The Paramount theme. I don't know. Have you got a screenplay you need me to read or anything? Nothing of the sort? Sorting through tabs, looking for your mute button. I think that's probably what's going on. Yep. Still muted.
There it is. With Zoom, they hide it. You got to go.
I know. We had this problem
really pain in the neck.
yesterday, and it takes some getting used to.
I try to mute it in the pre-game warm-up here, so that I don't interfere with David's getting everything ready, and then I always forget to turn it back on.
Right, and then hi, Greg.
I was really hoping you'd do Fractured Fairy Tales again. I really like that. I like Imperial Margarine. I like the Wizard of Oz one.
Sure, there's
a bunch of them I like. And of
I
course,
can't decide whether
as you
to
did
favorites.
me a favor and played, I like Fanfare for the Common Man, which is probably my favorite of all.
Yeah, well, that's a fantastic thing, and we should play them end to end, and then you wouldn't have to do so much news gathering because the show would only be 5 minutes long.
I have some really super duper important breaking news.
I'd better get to it. Yes.
You ready?
No. Yes.
C-SPAN and YouTube announce a partnership to bring C-SPAN to YouTube. I thought C-SPAN was already on YouTube. What do I know?
C-SPAN on like the YouTube TV thing? Okay, because
there's
TV, lots of C-SPAN clips on YouTube.
C-SPAN networks to YouTube TV, whatever that is.
I know a couple people who use YouTube TV, having disconnected from cable. I don't get it entirely, but okay.
That means 50 more people get to watch C-SPAN. It's wonderful.
Well, I think that's a quorum. So it's important that
certainly a minion.
I see what you mean.
You're covered.
Yeah. So now that YouTube offers a sort of a cable television alternative product, I guess C-SPAN wasn't in their channel lineup.
But now they are.
Good.
I know that you were having trouble sleeping, and I just wanted to let you know.
Right. This will make me feel an awful lot better. I don't know whether there's room for this, but now we got a thing going here. We should pitch a show. I don't know whether C-SPAN, whether YouTube TV, I don't think they produce shows the way like Netflix does. But maybe we need to we'll do YouTube videos of reactions to congressional procedure. What do you think? This is the first time I've ever seen a motion to proceed, Greg. I can't believe it. Oh, my God.
We should do,
that guy's out of order.
Session of the House in Mystery Science Theater 3000 style.
Yeah. Oh, well, that was the original. That's the original impetus behind what became this show was the idea that I ought to be doing Political Science Theater 3000 and watching C-SPAN and using their feed to say, all right, now what he's doing, the reason he's doing this is because of that.
Right. And then flip to the British speaker.
Right. Order. I've never heard anybody say order this way before. Oh, this is so funny. I'm going to video it and 10,000 people are going to watch it. Smash the like button.
So, who knew that yesterday was going to turn out to be Jeffrey Epstein Day?
The Air Force.
Yeah.
They knew. They were ordered to fly in his honor.
And in addition to that, we have a little side parallel thing about Donald Trump's health. So why don't we start from that?
Yes.
But you got to do it in the political sense.
Okay.
Donald Trump's health is such a big deal that the people he pays to have independent opinions, have all decided that anybody who brings up his health is obviously trying to purport or support or somehow comport a hoax because everybody said he was dead. Nobody really said that. What they said is that the guy's impaired, which is still true.
Yeah.
Okay, so then he had a press conference and he survived. And see, that proves everybody was, it doesn't.
A seated,
anything.
Right. Seated press conference. No, I understand there was also, no ties, so nobody wore a tie so that no one would notice.
He still has bruises on his hand. He's got these really weird welts on his face. He doesn't look well. All of that's true. He did disappear
He's mentally
for a while.
Incompetent.
All of that stuff.
Yeah.
And our friend Adam Cochran had a whole list of things about why Adam Cochran, thinks that the evidence, medication, his dragging his foot, his wandering around, all points to a series of mini strokes. And he published that yesterday. And it was funny, reading the responses to him from the paid people who are paid to have independent thoughts, paid by Trump.
Oh.
And so, they said, oh, you're stupid. You're not even a doctor. Well, yes, at the very beginning of the whole thread here, I said, I'm not a doctor, but I spoke to medical specialists, and here's what they told me. Oh, but you're not a doctor. Well, okay, like you have reading comprehension issues. I understand. I hope you get help, that kind of thing. And you have to expect that on social media.
Yes.
But it went a step further than that. Okay. And in order to bring this into context, I first have to point out that yesterday news broke that the Trump White House is attempting to meddle in the already fascinating New York City mayoral election. Zoran Mamdani is immune, but what they want to do is they want Eric Adams, the tainted Eric Adams, and the idiot Curtis Sliwa, perennial loser, to drop out. And the way that they plan to do this, because they're incredibly incompetent, is to make Adams, the current mayor, ambassador to something.
That can happen. They could do that. Sure. Okay.
All right. So here's the story from the New York Times. Breaking news. President Trump's advisors are said to have discussed giving Mayor Eric Adams a position in the administration as a way to clear the field in November's mayoral election and damage the chances of the Democratic frontrunner, Zoran Mamdani. The idea is that Mamdani's running in the 30 to 40% range in polls.
Yeah.
Almost 20. Sliwa's 15, the Republican. Cuomo's an independent. And Adams, the other independent, is in single digits. So if everybody drops out and consolidates around Cuomo, maybe Cuomo can beat Mamdani. That's the wet dream of the billionaires who are Trump's friends who happen to live in New York and fear that they'll actually have to pay a fair tax, and they hate that and they don't want to.
I would like to get them on the record as to why they don't like Sliwa. I'm just curious.
Well, Sliwa's useless.
I mean, yeah, he's a dope, but it's interesting that the president wants the Republican
he's a dope,
to drop
but
out.
He's his own man dope. In other words, he's not going to respond to anything that the billionaires and puppet makers want. He doesn't automatically. He's more libertarian than he is MAGA.
What if they take his magic hat off? Will that work?
No, then he disappears.
Oh. All right. Well, he's like Sliwa is actually Frosty the Snowman, as it turns out.
Well, taking his hat off would be like throwing water on the Wicked Witch of the West. Right. You just melt, and they don't want to see that.
Okay.
Interestingly, this New York Times story also points out something I've told you, and you knew.
That's why you like it.
Any move by the Trump administration could be explosive in a deeply democratic city like New York, where the president remains unpopular. It's also unclear if any change to the mayoral field would have an effect on the results. Election law would make it difficult for Adams or Sliwa to remove their names, even if they drop out at this late juncture, given the existing ballot certification and printing timelines. There's also no guarantee that either of their support bases would automatically vote for Cuomo.
No, not at all.
Sliwa's not likely to drop out. Adams, I think, is likely to drop out. He's in fourth place. And can he be bribed into dropping out?
Yeah.
Adams could be bribed into anything.
Right. I mean,
and he's already beholden to the Trump administration because they could go the other way and say, look, it's not like we're just going to offer you the ambassadorship to this country that was just created 2 weeks ago that you never heard of. If you don't take our offer, which is just, you can't refuse, then we're going to bring back those indictments.
Yeah, I mean, I
so
can't
he's
recall
toast.
how those
Adams
came
is
out.
Toast. There's no way he could refuse it.
Yeah, my recollection was that they wanted those charges dismissed without prejudice so that they could bring them back, but the judge thought that was too unfair and too much leverage and dismissed them with prejudice, or wanted to anyway, and I can't remember how that one came out, but that's true.
Doesn't matter.
It's a good reminder that this very likely could be, or they'd come up with new charges. Like, here are your choices: drop out and become ambassador to some place we send you, or we'll arrest you and get you out of the mix that way.
Then pardon you and then make you ambassador to some place we send you.
If necessary, sure.
It's a lot of different ways that this could break, but that's the background to all of this. So in other words, Trump wants Cuomo, who he's known for 40 years. And Cuomo, of course, is saying, I never talked to Trump. There's no plan here. And the Trump people are saying, we talk to Cuomo all the time. This is the guy we want. He's our man. And so that's not helping Cuomo any in the New York City race either.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, all right.
Again, any move by the Trump administration could be explosive in a deeply democratic city where the president remains unpopular. So a lot of New Yorkers chimed in on social media when they heard this story yesterday and said, if Trump is for Cuomo, that's the end of Cuomo. I mean, let's be real. Everybody hates Trump in New York City.
Yeah, at this point.
So that's the background to this. So our friend, Adam, who was doing this whole set of stories and posts.
Oh, right. Back to, Trump's health.
About Trump's health.
Okay.
Now
how did we...
winds up being contacted by none other than Andrew Cuomo's political assassin, his half-brother Chris Cuomo, who used to work for CNN and got fired for interfering and taking sides in Andrew's campaign when you're supposed to be a neutral journalist. He was fired for that.
Finally, somebody's not neutral. Look what happens.
So, but now he has his own YouTube station, and he's an influencer.
C-SPAN.
Okay. And he winds up texting our friend Adam.
Texting, okay. Chris Cuomo texts Adam.
Yeah, Chris Cuomo texts Adam.
Not Eric Adams.
And tries
Adam,
to...
the health care reporter guy.
And tries to convince Adam Cochran.
Thank you. That's it. Yes.
To stop talking about Trump's health. Okay. And why is Chris Cuomo getting involved? Because his half-brother's running, and this is all on behalf of the Trump administration.
So Andrew Cuomo thinks he's getting help
yesterday,
from Trump. Yeah.
Mamdani, tweets, today's news confirms that Cuomo's Trump's choice for mayor. The White House is considering jobs for Adams and Sliwa to clear the field. New Yorkers are sick of corrupt politics, and backroom deals, no matter who's running, will deliver a better future on November 4th. So Mamdani's going to win anyway. And Adam Cochran sees this and says, oh, damn, I guess that explains why Chris Cuomo DM'd me trying to get me to stop covering Trump's health. And then he prints a screenshot of Chris Cuomo writing him, Adam Cochran, and says, your Trump health cover-up is beneath your level of sophistication. Like, why is Chris Cuomo paying attention to this rando on
it's nice
social media,
but
who's talking about Trump's health? Because, it offends him that it's going to bother the campaign of his brother. And Adam Cochran says, oh, not only am I not going to stop, I think I'll publish this and show everybody that the Cuomos are trying to influence my reporting. And that ain't going to happen. And it feels like the city person who got the potato chips from Eric Adams. I mean, I don't know what these people are thinking.
No idea.
If I privately contact you, this will never get out.
That was kind of foolish. And what is just a weird thing? Like, even if they knew one another, your Trump health cover-up is beneath your level of sophistication. Yeah. I mean, it was very straightforwardly laid out. Here are the issues, and here are the experts.
So again, you have to look at it as an amusing whole big picture of how social media works. So the same people who are paid to support Trump then start tweeting, what are you saying? This is his brother, Chris Cuomo. What are you, an idiot?
Yeah.
And Adam is just laughing at them and said, yeah, there's no connection between the two Cuomos. They never talked to each other.
Right. Oh, that's funny. And people are trying to, oh, no, it wasn't.
I'd explain to you what plausible deniability is, but those are like big words and you wouldn't understand them, so I'm not even going to try.
All right. I mean, it's weird on 15 different levels.
I mean, it's just the whole thing is really amusing, but none of it is going to make any difference.
No,
it's all John Katsimedes and all the other billionaires who own real estate, grocery stores, media channels, radio stations, and they're afraid they're going to get taxed. So they're afraid of Mamdani, and they know Mamdani is going to win, and they think somehow by magical thinking that if Sliwa, who won't, and Adams, who might, drop out, all of that support goes to Cuomo, who would still be behind, but not as much.
Yeah, I know.
And the story just makes it even less likely anybody would ever vote for Andrew Cuomo. I mean, that's the weird part about it. How does this help?
I don't know. I can't quite make out. Well, I'm sure they just figure, well, it might help, so let's try it. But yeah, I don't think anybody who's running around in this mayoral campaign, if you're saying, I'm really liking Sliwa, is going to be like, well, Sliwa, Cuomo, what's the difference? I'll just move over to Cuomo. I think you just stay home.
Sliwa's consolidating the 3% Staten Island vote, so
that's right.
He's not dropping out.
Yeah. So he could run for borough president.
Yeah, they could always do that.
Yeah.
But I think that's where Eric Adams came from in the first place. He was like Brooklyn.
Yeah, right. So then he became mayor and got a sweet deal and got his crimes pardoned. So why not try it?
Right.
Sounds like a path to success.
So there's that health thing.
Yeah.
And now let's look at our buddy Jeffrey Epstein, who's, by the way, back in the news. So
how's his health?
His health is not good.
Yeah, his pulse is way down.
But Ghislaine Maxwell is doing fine in her country club.
Yeah.
And that's the trigger that really upset the survivors. So a whole bunch of survivors who had never been public before got together, gave a press conference.
Yeah.
And as you pointed out, Trump tried to drown it out.
I think. I mean, that's what people are saying. It just doesn't make any sense as a tactic.
Well, there's no reason why there was a 9:30 in the morning flyby.
Except that he loves Jeffrey Epstein and thinks he should get military honors.
And in fact, everybody before the conference said, this is going to be really interesting because Trump's going to try to drown it out because there's a scheduled flyby at the same time as the press conference. Yeah. It's like everybody knows this is happening. So, again, it's not like one of those subtle things that, it's just stupid. It's this incompetent stupidness.
Wow.
And anyway,
you're going to have to bomb it if you want it to be disrupted.
And it's a fascinating deal.
Yes.
And I know you don't watch these things, but this one
I might have, but I didn't. I told you already. I didn't. But it would have been possible. It didn't sound so boring
speeches, right? And you don't watch State of the Unions,
But now I don't have to because my version of the YouTube channel is I look on social media and Aaron Rupar tells me what happened.
Yeah, pretty much, and gives you the highlights.
Yeah.
And part of the highlights were these women getting together and saying, "Look, we're here." Media reporters, after they made their statement about how upsetting this is, and it's really important that people sign the discharge petition and get that Epstein stuff out into the public as best as possible, because we don't understand why Trump is hiding all of this. More on that. Some of them actually said, I'm a Republican, and I'm asking you, Mr. Trump, please release these. It's important for the public, and people have to understand the reason we're asking for this isn't to embarrass anybody. It's got nothing to do with politics. We just want to make sure that nothing like this ever happens again. And it's horrible that he was protected. And it's horrible that Ghislaine Maxwell got moved to summer camp. And so, we're all here saying that that this needs to be done. And they were asked by some reporters, do you think it's a hoax? It's not a hoax. This actually happened to us. It's really upsetting.
You think it's a
we're
hoax?
Still scared, but we're here. Trump called the whole thing a Democrat hoax. That was his point.
Okay. All right. But I mean, I don't know why you adopt that framing, but okay. They're
everything about Epstein from now on is a Democrat hoax.
It's just asking the survivors.
And the Republicans who were speaking, these women were saying, we're Republicans and it's no hoax.
Yeah.
But that's not even the interesting part of the conference.
Oh, well. All right,
the press conference got really interesting when the reporters kept pressing some of the women about, well, what exactly do you want to come out? Is there a list? And one of them said, of course there's a list. Look, we were the ones who were abused.
Right.
We know who abused us.
Well, then.
We will talk to each other and make a list.
Oh.
We know who it is. We were there, unfortunately for us.
Right.
We know exactly who this is.
That makes some witnesses.
We may or may not publish this. We'll do it amongst ourselves, but there will be a list. And every reporter who was there, ears perked up, started taking notes. Now we got a subject that we can investigate and or look at. We got a month, 3 months worth of stories just on that quote alone.
I guess so. I wonder what, it'll be interesting. They'll obviously have to either decide, okay, do we attack their credibility? I guess they have to do that right away. But they're used to that. They've been living with that for 30 years.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you can recall that list. They could, there's all sorts of things like in a courtroom, they could say, well, it's been X number of years. Are you sure of your memory? Are you sure you haven't read in a newspaper that it was Alan Dershowitz? And not that you actually remember it being Alan Dershowitz.
And not Prince Andrew.
Right.
Because they look alike, speak alike, and you can easily mistake one for the other. I mean,
they'd have tremendous difficulty making it standing up in court, but as a list. But certainly their own testimony will still be admissible, but they don't care about what's admissible in court at the moment. This will be the biggest story in the world if they say another press conference is coming and all of the surviving victims who are willing to speak out are going to come and name the names. That'd be probably the biggest press conference in decades.
Right. Now,
it's going to require a B-52 bombing.
So the next step happens.
Yes.
The House Oversight Committee, run by James Comer.
That's an oversight. He still runs it.
Is collecting and producing thousands of pages of Epstein testimony that they got from the Department of Justice. And Julie K. Brown, who follows this for the Miami Herald and broke the original story about Epstein.
Yes.
So she's an Epstein expert.
She's an expert.
This is so stupid. They keep publishing the same already known stuff over and over and over again. They think we're stupid.
That's what
I heard. And they think somehow or other this is going to, change people's mind. It isn't. It's nothing. And so then they have a closed door hearing about it. And one of the people who I guess is on that oversight committee, or at least for some reason had access to a closed door briefing about it, is Nancy Mace.
You can't close the door on Nancy Mace, damn it.
No. So she goes and she gives an interview and she says, and I quote this from Eric Michael Garcia, Nancy Mace says she's not worried about crossing Trump on Epstein. And here's her quote. Donald Trump is the one who banned Jeffrey Epstein from Mar-a-Lago. Okay, you knew that. That was the claim.
Meh.
Then the next statement is explosive.
Oh.
He was an FBI informant, and he talked to the feds to get this guy turned over. Donald Trump is a hero.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. So that's why she's not afraid of crossing him. She's not going to.
He was an FBI informant?
All right.
Is that in the files? Is that what DOJ has in their files? Is that what Trump is protecting from being known? That he was in on the deal? That he was part of the cover-up?
Maybe. That would be interesting.
It's Nancy Mace. You can't believe it, but whoa.
Right.
Really? An FBI informant?
That would be news, certainly, but I'm sure by the time he gets to do it, I was an FBI agent. You're wrong about that. Plus, I was 007. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue down the Epstein rabbit hole, I guess, which is not even a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't even conspiracy.
Rabbits just running around on the surface at this point.
It's just what's in the news. This is from The Hill. Mace leaves meeting with Epstein victims visibly upset. She herself was a victim, she says.
She was upset.
And it just brought stuff. And she was at the oversight briefing. And she said, I left the oversight briefing with Epstein victims early, she wrote on Twitter.
Well, of course.
As a recent survivor, not 2 years in, I had a very difficult time listening, full-blown panic attacks, sweating, hyperventilating, shaking. I can't breathe. I feel the pain. God bless all survivors. And let's see what she does with the discharge petition. The funny thing is, one of the real verbal supporters of the discharge petition is Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's not backing down on that.
No, I saw that news yesterday, and she showed up at the press conference alongside the sponsors. It's interesting. I mean, she's the congresswoman from QAnon, so she can't entirely shed it, but she kind of has been quiet out of deference and loyalty, I guess, to Trump. So it's been interesting. And I saw Thomas Massie saying that she was going to be, joining him and saying that maybe one of the things that they could do with this list or any other information that the victims had to bring forward, that some of the victims would find themselves in legal trouble or sued if they made their claims in public, but that he and Marjorie Taylor Greene had the prerogative to read the information on the House floor and hide behind, and it's a good claim. I shouldn't say hide behind necessarily, but use as a protective wall the speech and debate clause. If they read it into the official proceedings or on the House floor, they couldn't be prosecuted for such things. I wanted to point out how interesting it was. I don't remember where Massie is on January 6th, but remember that Marjorie Taylor Greene still endorses the idea that if the president doesn't like what's going on the House floor, speech and debate clause be damned, it's okay if he incites a mob to attack the Capitol and murder you for saying it. That's still a live theory of the president's, and Marjorie Taylor Greene is still supporting it in public, but she's pretty sure that the law will.
Court appointment, that's all.
Yeah, she's pretty sure the law will protect her on this one.
Axios says Jeffrey Epstein survivor Lisa Phillips. I mean, you have to step back and look at the big picture here, right? I mean, if Trump wanted to make the story go away by calling it a Democrat hoax and doing a flyover and then releasing a whole bunch of stuff to the House Oversight Committee, that ain't it. This isn't making the story go away.
Yeah, well, he may have no idea.
Jeffrey Epstein survivor Lisa Phillips suggested Wednesday that victims of the convicted sex offender are contemplating publishing a list of people. He's actually not just a sex offender; he's a human trafficker. Are contemplating and that's why they're so upset about Ghislaine Maxwell. Are contemplating publishing a list of people. Publishing a list of people involved in their abuse. If the Justice Department doesn't make more documents public, why it matters. The Trump administration has faced tremendous public backlash for concluding there's no official Epstein client list, and if victims release their own list, they could trigger another fight between MAGA loyalists and federal officials. Several of us Epstein survivors have been discussing creating our own lists, Phillips told reporters. We know the names. Many of us were abused by them. Phillips said the list would be compiled by survivors and for survivors, and the public should stay tuned. A potential list drafted by the survivors would be the first such compilation identifying the enablers who helped Epstein exploit women, per attorney Brad Edwards, who represents multiple victims. In response to a reporter asking if the victims believed DOJ had internal evidence, Edwards said, there's not a list. I don't think he wrote the names of these people down. Driving the news, Phillips suggested making an unofficial client list during one of several press conferences held on Capitol Hill by survivors. The rally came a day after the House Oversight Committee released 33,000 Epstein-related documents, but as I told you, Julie K. Brown said there's nothing there, it's all repeats. Congressional leadership hoped the massive release would decrease public pressure, but the committee's top Democrat, Robert Garcia of California, said most of the files had already been made public. Same thing Julie K. Brown said, and Brown is even a bigger expert than Garcia is on this.
Same thing that the Republican and MAGA influencers that they brought to the White House for the first release said when they came out with the pre-printed binders, the Epstein Files, what was supposedly on Bondi's desk, and they came out waving it, and we've been led to the inside on all of this, and then like a day later they were all forced to admit we've seen all this already.
And here's a factoid nugget, which is useful. It's unclear if Massie's discharge petition will garner the additional 2 signatures it needs to trigger a House vote.
That's it?
That's it. They need 2 signatures.
I looked yesterday. I guess they haven't updated the site on that, and I guess that's probably under the control of the speaker. But I looked, and I was like, oh, they're not anywhere close to getting the right number of signatures yet. But it may have been a big day for Democratic signatures yesterday, or the speaker may be telling them, I want you to drag your feet on posting new names so that it looks like there's only 150 signatures, which is what it looked like yesterday.
Yep. Anyway, so there's all of that. Now, let's also cover something we did a little bit of. As you know, as a non-lawyer, I love covering legal stuff when I know nothing about it.
Why not?
But this particular story is about Harvard winning a lawsuit, an important victory, ruling Trump's administration freeze on Harvard research money unconstitutional. And I'm citing a very good newspaper that probably should get more play than it does, the Harvard Crimson.
Well, yeah, it's one of the top.
They
I
cover
understand
Harvard
they're
stuff
kind of a
pretty
big
well.
school.
Yeah.
With smart students, allegedly, or rich ones.
Allegedly, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, oh, look at that. Yeah, they've posted all the new names now. So, yeah, that's 200 and they just to update you on it. There's a lot of new names were released yesterday. They may have signed yesterday. In fact, it does look like a lot of people signed yesterday, right after the press conference. That half the list is September 3rd. But the 2 signatures, they say, are required. They are at currently 214. So we had it right yesterday in saying, 216 are necessary because of the 4 vacancies in the House. Not 218, the normal full House majority, but 216. Okay, cool.
Yep. So the Harvard Crimson story. Judge hands victory to Harvard in funding lawsuit ruling Trump administration freeze unconstitutional.
Yeah.
Now, one of the interesting things,
one of them,
is that there are a number of stories about
that is interesting.
Appellate courts, circuit courts, disrespecting the Supreme Court when they write their opinions, which is not a thing, but now it's becoming a thing.
All right.
And, when they write, whether it's the Posse Comitatus Act or whether it's the Alien Enemies Act, they're basically saying, look, the administration is being arbitrary and capricious when they, block this stuff and make stuff up and claim that we're being invaded when we're not, and that Harvard is anti-Semitic and that's why we're doing it, when that, in fact, is not the reason. It's retaliatory and stuff like that. And then they usually throw in stuff like, you have asked the appellate courts to try to rule this in the way that you have suggested, and it's nearly impossible because you're breaking precedent and we don't know what's going on. And so when there's no order, if there's no regular order, it's really difficult for us to do our jobs. Yeah, and that started to creep into a lot of their opinions, and I thought that was kind of interesting. Yeah, that's not legal; that's political.
True. All right, and a good point. Good point. I mean, there's legal trappings to it, but you're right. The court, to the extent that anybody denies it's political at all, well, then you're just not looking. Okay. By the way, I'm still watching. As you're telling me about this, I'm looking at this discharge petition, and I said how many people signed on September 3rd. That's yesterday. I should point out, it's not like they're late to the game. Thomas Massie only filed the thing on September 2nd. So So Massie's signature is likewise September 2nd. So when I looked yesterday, they brought the petition to the press conference and everybody step up and sign it. So, all right, got it.
All right. So in other random news, Stephen Ratner points out on Twitter, in July, the surplus of job openings compared to the number of unemployed job seekers. Openings versus people looking for employment.
Yeah.
Okay. So usually there's more openings than there are job seekers.
You would
so
hope.
Employers have to raise their prices, they raise their salary, get bonuses, they're doing something. So if you're looking for a job in 2023, it's pretty easy to find.
Okay, we'll go there.
In 2025, there are more people looking for a job than there are jobs.
Okay.
See, I thought, this whole ICE thing was supposed to make it so that Native Americans, which is to say,
not Native Americans,
tribes,
right,
could find jobs easier. First Nation Relief Act. I thought that's what the whole thing was.
Too bad.
But that's not working out very well.
That's weird. It's like they don't understand the economy.
Well, they're tanking the economy, and that's what's going on here.
That could be it. That could be the
reason.
So
it's not like the unemployed shot up, although it did. It's that the opening shot down, which they certainly did.
Well, you know how to fix that. Tax cuts to incentivize the brilliant rich people to create jobs.
Tax everybody.
Tax everybody, because
that's
some reason
how you
would
fix
be,
this.
Okay. But what about not taxing the extremely wealthy because they're my friends? Would that work? No, I guess not. All right. Well, that's odd. Still, AI will fix everything.
Oh, here's a interesting piece in Politico, if you think stupidity is interesting.
Right.
Chief Justice John Roberts is wary of entering political fray, his top advisor says.
Oh, that is terrible.
Chief Justice Roberts is responsible for half the problems right now are happening in the political arena.
Well, he's a very skilled Jenga player, and he's going to try and remove another plank of the Constitution. That will fix it. If I just get rid of this and eliminate that amendment, it will fix all prior problems. Oh, I can't believe it's only made things more precarious and worse. I should be studying something at this point. Well, too bad. Yeah, he should be worrying about that. And the Harvard case thing too. I'm catching up now with what you've actually already informed us of. One of the things I saw somebody make a good point of, and it is, what's his real name? He now posts on social media under just his weirdly truncated initials, MTSW, and isn't his, what's his full name? I can't even remember. But
I don't even know who this is.
He's very popular.
If it's not Big Balls or Cat Turd, I'm not sure who it is.
It's a very popular social media figure whose name I think is Matthew something. It's the MT and rats. But at any rate, MTSW, who you would recognize his avatar, and I have to go and look it up. But he made the very interesting point.
That stands for Matt, the same weirdo, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Basically, the same weirdo they used to know from Twitter. Yes. Pointing out the result of, is it result or the word that came down from the judge in the case in the Harvard lawsuit, that the whole thing is essentially bogus, and this smoke screen, as the judge called it, of suing. Well, the real reason we're suing Harvard is their anti-Semitic atmosphere by allowing people to protest about Palestine. Even though the case, by the way, was being handled by a Harvard graduate hired out of the blue into a much higher level in the Justice Department job than he should have been eligible for, and harboring a grudge and using the job to sue the school he's mad at, and who, by the way, left behind a record of his own, in fact, personal anti-Semitism and Nazi fandom at Harvard.
Sounds like he should be promoted to running national security.
This is pretty much what he's doing, and he was handling the case all by himself somehow for Harvard. And it turns out, a weird thing, sometimes there are other lawyers and even judges who are actually better legal practitioners than you, even though you went to Harvard, and they clobber your ass in court and shut down the whole program and say, yeah, there's no connection between canceling biological research grants and your allegation that Harvard hates Jews, which should have thrilled you when you were at Harvard because you're a Nazi. This whole thing falls apart. It's not going to work in my courtroom. But as MTSW points out, this is very interesting. Now the outcome of the case is becoming clear. Why were we treated over the course of the past several weeks and even months to New York Times and other leading newspapers articles about how Harvard was on the brink of surrendering? The story for the last couple months was Harvard knuckles under, Harvard settles, and they never did settle. It was always rumors that they were going to settle. But no, in fact, they fought it in court and won. Why has the storyline been Harvard surrendering to Trump this whole time? That is a good question.
It is a good question. And the other side of the coin is why aren't the other Ivy League schools, and why aren't other schools in general also fighting the Trump administration? Because you can win.
Yeah. You should be doing that. And maybe they are. Maybe we've been reading these headlines in passing without looking closely at the body of the story. I don't know. Although I got the sense that there were some schools that really did settle.
Trump is winning.
Yeah, there you go. That's basically what people were saying. And it has made no sense. Certainly not in the context of Harvard. Whether or not it's the same story. There we are. Was it Michael Tay Sweeney? I think, is MTSW. That makes some sense, right?
Michael Tay Sweeney weirdo.
Yes. He's just a popular commentator who I don't think his background is political. I think his background is in like film and television editing, if I remember correctly. But he makes some excellent observations and does so widely, and many people share them. So.
Well,
I invite you to join.
That's what we do.
Sure,
we're weird in our own way, so
we're no different.
Don't take it as a terrible insult.
No, it isn't. It's
there's a guy who's basically an expert on men's clothing on social media who makes wonderful political commentary.
He does, and he finds amazing ways of connecting the two subjects, which I think is honestly quite astonishing. And J.D.
Vance is an idiot. He looks like the Pillsbury Doughboy. And by the way, look how he's dressed. And this is why it's not good.
Right. But here's
the proper way to dress, and here's an example. And
that's always good information. I always like to know about that. And not that I'm a good practitioner. I just like to know what I'm missing out on. But that's always been the story of the internet, at least the social internet and the blogosphere for us has always been, you never know who's going to have astute commentary to offer.
And he is an expert, right? And here's how I can tell you that this guy from Congress is wearing a tailored suit, and this guy is wearing something off the rack. And here's how I know. Look at the lines here, and look how the shoulders, it's great stuff. I love that stuff.
Yeah. You could solve a mystery with that stuff. Damn it.
Right. And in the process of needing 2 more signatures for this discharge petition, I just want to point out that the last 2 people who signed are really underdressed, and this one is
and
then just for the sake of argument, let's look at Jeff Van Drew, because he's always interesting in terms of how he dresses.
True. Yeah, well, if you can predict the stock market with it, then you'll have some interest, I think, from the wider world.
Now, here's some big news, different direction altogether. California, Oregon, and Washington State just announced the joint West Coast Health Alliance to counter Trump and RFK destruction of our public health system. As Greg Sargent, argued last week, this is becoming a new frontier in Democratic governor resistance to Trump. Years ago,
what does it mean?
Decade, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Political scientist Brendan Nyhan, who's at Dartmouth,
sure,
said, him. Go out of your way not to politicize vaccines. It will only end badly if you do.
Okay, that seems like a good prediction.
And he was right, and it did end badly. It is ending badly.
It hasn't ended yet, but it's bad.
It hasn't
certainly.
Ended yet. And so Greg Sargent and others are saying, okay, this was not a good idea, but since they're doing that, go all in. Gavin Newsom troll style.
Yeah,
politicize it. Alliance. Politicize it to the max. Make it something you're running on.
Okay.
Because I understand 15 years ago you didn't want to do that kind of stuff, and I understand why 15 years ago you wouldn't want to. It's not 15 years ago.
Yeah, you're not the one politicizing vaccines.
It's done already. There's nothing you can do to unpoliticize it, to make it political and win on the politics.
Yeah. If the politics are, we think you should be able to access vaccines so that you live.
Yeah, we think your children should survive to be adults.
Right.
And so we're going to help you do that. Why? Because in the news, Florida is getting rid of all of the vaccine mandates for schools.
Well,
and people who know the guy who's the Surgeon General there said, he's a performative idiot like many other Trumpers.
Yeah.
And so, that's fine as far as the politics go, but it's really going to hurt children. And so, remember the measles outbreak at Disneyland in California? Disney World is asking for a polio outbreak.
Yeah. Right. That'd be interesting to see whether or not Disney still governs Florida.
Polio's not a thing right at the moment, but just wait.
Yeah. We'll just have to see. And if, Disney, what's his name? Meatball Ron DeSantis has worked hard to something that I think would otherwise be a laudable goal, reduce the influence of one single corporation, Disney, in running the state of Florida. But they did a very good job in running the state of Florida up until he snatched away from them. But I'm curious, I guess he was working to undermine their ability to actually control the municipality in which Disney World was situated. But I was kind of wondering, if Disney were to say, well, look, you got to be vaccinated to come into our parks, what would that do? And would is that powerful enough to say drive real on the ground policy, personal policies in Florida or not? Will people say, I prefer Meatball Ron, he's more fun than Walt Disney World? Well, I don't think so, but you could go ahead that way. But I mean, I think they're probably, I don't know. I think in this atmosphere, they're cowed into not doing something like that, and they've lost a lot of their influence. And I don't know what they could. I don't know how you enforce that. The longest line in the place is no longer for, I don't know. My choice of rides would be dated. Space Mountain, something like that. But to get in by showing your vaccination paperwork, which would just be attacked as yargle bargle. That's the real authoritarianism, the real fascist dictatorship. You have to show your papers to get into Disney World. It's going to be something of a disaster. Wow. Okay.
Staying on the science theme here, Eric Berger says China's laughing at the Senate hearing at NASA's lunar plans. It's the usual mishmash of parochial politics, lobbying for traditional space, backslapping Star Trek references, and whistling past the graveyard. And Charles Fishman, who follows stuff, one of those people who follow stuff, says people have been complaining for 60 years about the lack of coherent space strategy from NASA. The problem isn't NASA. It's never been NASA. The place is stocked with scientists and engineers who like nothing better than to think in terms of good plan. The problem has always been politics. We get the space program Congress designs for us, and Congress is the institution that routinely comes within hours of letting the United States run out of money.
Well, yes.
Which is a great way to describe Congress, because, that's who they are. Why would you expect them to do any better with anything else?
Yeah, right. That's true. Okay. I mean, that's interesting. Now I'm thinking about the dynamics of NASA, and I guess you're right. They always they're stocked with people who could kind of accomplish just about anything. But
I mean, you used to have people like Bill Nelson, but you don't anymore because
we've run out
that's
of
what the voters
things
want.
to splashy things that we can put people on. It's like there's only so many things close to the Earth that we can land on. Sorry, and if that's all you're interested in, then but there's been some spectacular science done at NASA that whole time, and we know lots more about, I don't know, our own atmosphere, the asteroid belt, the atmosphere and evolution of Mars, but we can't put people on Vulcan. Sorry.
So
still have to fund
again,
this place.
In ending, because we're just about the end of my 15-minute segment, Rich as a party, who is Andrew Cuomo's spokesperson.
What's his name?
Rich Azzo Party.
I was like, what is that? Rich is a party. How rich is a party? Okay. Azzo Party is his last name?
Yeah.
Rich. Okay. What do you... Can I call you Dick? No.
Can I call you Az?
Okay.
So he's responding to this idea that there's a backroom deal with Trump and Adams to clear the space for Andrew Cuomo. And
he says
in response to that, he posts a picture of Zoran Mamdani,
who is rich as a party,
walking down the street arm in arm with Brad Lender and a bunch of the other people who ran against him.
Oh no, I like that guy. Yeah.
In the Democratic primary. All of whom are now supporting him, which is the point of him walking arm in arm with all of these people in public, with like regular, ordinary people in the background taking pictures and stuff. And Rich Azzo Party says, to be clear, there's no truth to this, but speaking of backroom deals, Zoran Mamdani, diss you? And post this picture of Mamdani publicly getting support from the people who ran against him. And Adam Carlson, the pollster, said, wait a minute, that's literally a photo of the Working Family Party's endorsees in the primary who hadn't even announced the recommended rank order at the time doing a photo op together. How is that a backroom deal? And how are you so bad at this?
Yeah. What an odd thing to... I mean, this is it's the normal course of events. You run in the primary, you lose, and then you endorse the guy who wins.
This is Andrew Cuomo's campaign in a nutshell. It's terrible. It doesn't know what it's doing.
No.
He did nothing and lost badly in the Democratic primaries, so decides to run as an independent. He decides his ticket to winning is somehow being like the nastiest, meanest jerk you ever knew, which is to say being himself.
Yeah,
That's
maybe he
not
thought that
working.
was New York.
And then, he accuses Mamdani of doing all the things that he does wrong himself. The absolute epitome of every accusation is a confession. And he's just bad at it. And there's nothing that he's doing that's endearing himself to voters, making himself more likable to voters.
Yeah.
And the reason that I'm just a loud asshole campaign generally fails is you have to, before you attack somebody, establish your own likability level to the point where you're going to not even think about the person who's making the charge. You're only going to look at the person who's being charged, who's being attacked. And he can't pull that off because he can't get past you're just being an asshole again.
Well, yeah. And I mean, that's because he can't get past the resigned in disgrace serial sexual abuser issue.
Plus, this whole campaign is geared around being a jerk. So everybody knows that you're reminding people every moment how much of a jerk you are.
You have to be the right kind of jerk, but it's doable. It's just not by him. And he doesn't. Look, you never rehabilitated yourself from the huge problem that caused you to leave the governorship in the first place. What do you? I mean, it hasn't been 10 years. It was just yesterday, politically speaking. So, I guess some people say the opposite. In politics, every 24 hours is an eternity. But I mean, when the governor resigns under a cloud, people remember it. And you can't come back in the middle of what should have been your own term and say, yeah, I'm not that guy anymore, but I'm worse. Actually, I'm a bigger jerk. Wow. All right. Well, I guess one of the few people that still gets paid by the Cuomo campaign doing what he's paid to do. Well, imagine seeing that as nefarious in some way. It's like you've never seen politics before, sir.
This is Thursday, September 4th. Yes. U.S. companies announced 1,494 new jobs in August, the lowest for the month since 2009. Jobs Friday's tomorrow, so we'll see what the official numbers are. Layoffs surged to 39% to 85,979. More people being laid off than hired. Welcome to Trump's Tariff America.
1,000 jobs available, America. Go get them. It's like a game show. Wow. All right. Thanks, Greg. Heading into the weekend. We'll see you again on Monday.
See you then.
All right. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. I feel like we got a clean up on a couple of other loose odds and ends here. And that may occupy the entirety of the second hour, which is what I really enjoyed. I like this format. I miss it when we don't have it going on because I always feel like it prompts me to examine new angles and new issues rather than the ones that I set aside, to the extent that I set anything aside ahead of time. And that makes the show that much more interesting for me. And I have to do the show, so it's important that it be interesting to me. Anyway, following up on the discharge petition, just because I thought you might have more questions about it. I refreshed the page just to see, hey, maybe they got the last two signatures that they need in the time we were talking about it, and it would be interesting to break that story, but unlikely to happen anytime soon, except that I note that there are the same number. There weren't any more Republicans than there were yesterday, that there were 4, we were told. And I scrolled through, and it's hard to tell because, almost everybody on it is a Democrat. But, of course, Thomas Massie is a Republican. He would be the first one to have signed it. And then the next Republican, it doesn't really matter where they come up in the order, does it? No. But Nancy Mace, who made a show of leaving the hearing very upset yesterday and saying that she's a victim and all of that. Well, okay, so it's hard to believe anything she has to say about herself, but in terms of where she's positioning herself politically. But she has been fairly consistent, I think, in saying all along that she was the victim of some sort of, I don't know whether it was sexual assault or other impropriety, but that's been a part of her narrative and her story and her biography for a long time. So I guess I'm okay sticking by that, even though I think she's a kook and likely to overplay her hand on such things. if that's even possible. And normally it's not, but she finds ways of making it more than she's entitled to, I guess, in claiming victim status, because she's also not very helpful to other victims. So in this case, maybe she will be. But we always think it's play acting when she does it, because she's personally weird. Anyway, she was the second Republican to sign. The other Republican names, it's not great company. I'll say that, right? Because Thomas Massie, at least he's always been a Republican gadfly and a problem for Republicans. And these other signatories are also problems for Republicans, but in a slightly different way. I'll tell you who they are if you don't know offhand, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Thomas Massie, they're all usual suspects, and all people that if I told you they're not great company, right? And I say, name me 4 Republicans, if one of them is Thomas Massie, because you still have to remind people that he exists. Name me 3 other Republicans who you would find out, A, would have signed this discharge petition, and B, would leave you saying, blah, I really didn't want to be on a list with this person. Because you can do it. And if you're shouting, if you're listening live, you're shouting at your non-radio radio computer thingy right now. If you're listening on podcast, you're shouting at your podcast player. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Nancy Mace. Yep, that's it. I didn't want to draw it out any further. Those are the 3. So, like I said, not great company. But the situation is this. With 212 Democrats in the House and 4 vacancies in the House, meaning that a majority, which you would need to break through with a discharge petition, being 216, with 212 Democrats, if all the Democrats signed it, and don't you think they should, then we would need 4 Republicans to make it to 216. Well, we've got the 212 on the ranks, and we've got the 4 signatures, so why isn't this over? And the answer has to be that there are 2 Democrats out there who haven't signed the discharge petition. So now it's a question of, can we find them, hunt them down, convince them to do this? Where were they? We don't know what the story is. I don't know who they are. Maybe someone has done that research. It's, I guess with a database, that you could manipulate, a nice table in a spreadsheet, you would be able to come up with this very quickly. But there you have it. There's 2 Democrats who aren't on, and I guess maybe one way of doing it without actually matching the lists and searching it out is you could, here we want to know the slapdash way of doing it. We'll go to congress.gov. This is how you could do such things. Well, the real way you would do it is you would have a database with the names of all the Democrats, and then a database that you could enter in the names of all the signatories and then just match it and find out what's missing. But I don't have that, so, and I'm on the air, so instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to congress.gov and look for the latest votes in the House, although I forget where they hide the damn thing. Okay, roll call votes. There we are, and we'll go to the House, and we'll look at the last vote to be taken was roll call number 234, taken yesterday. What were they doing? They were agreeing to the Perry Amendment, which, by the way, failed by a recorded vote of 120 to 307, and I'll go look at the roll, and I will see who's absent. And then that would be a quick and dirty indication that maybe those are the people, 4 Democrats who didn't vote. And let's see, sort them by, there we are, by not voting. So let's see, the Republicans who didn't vote yesterday, Daniel Goldman, I'm sorry, not the Republicans, the Democrats, Mike Quigley, Mikey Sherrill, she could be up campaigning in her governor's race, and Eric Swalwell. So now we can go over to the office of the clerk and look at the, is it searchable? Search by name. Okay, watch this. Let's say Swalwell. Is he on the list? Did I spell it right? I should just make sure of that, by the way. Yes. So there you have it. He's not on the list. So I bet he missed it. And I would guess Cheryl, maybe Mikey Cheryl. No data found. Now I got to figure out, am I doing this correctly? Like, is Massie, if I write in Massie? Yep, there he is. Okay, so there you go. By the way, out of the two, I guessed it right away. Unless my methodology fails me. And who else's name did I have on the list as not voting? Goldman. Is Goldman on the list? No data found. All right, so something's wrong with my methodology here. That's interesting. So Jared Golden is there. Goldman is not. And how could there be so many missing? Unless, All right, who else was absent yesterday? And what's going on with my methodology? Why isn't this working? I'm curious. Quigley, Mike Quigley, is his name on the list? Yes, there it is. He signed it on September 2nd. I don't know why he missed the last vote yesterday. That could be something else. And Mikey Sherrill, and were there other names too? Swalwell, and he didn't show up. Mikey Sherrill, but Daniel Goldman also. So there's at least three, and maybe do I have the number of Democratic members of the House do I have the number wrong? 212? I thought that I checked that yesterday. All right. Well, at any rate, I guess there were probably, I'm not certain what would cause the absences, but Mikey Sherrill, I could imagine, was longer than normally up in New Jersey campaigning for governor. And there will be pressure about that as a Democratic woman to get herself back to D.C. to sign the petition, even if she then flies back and starts campaigning for governor again. And I'm sure she's gotten an email about it from the whip's office. All right. Well, that seems unusual, but also unusual is why am I able to find three Democrats? Let's say 212 plus the 4 would be 216, but we only have 2, 4. All right. Well, I don't really know. Oh, there's Mikey Sherrill, though, by the way. Did I spell it wrong? Oh, maybe I only put one R in there because she's the 212th signatory out of the 214. It doesn't surprise me that she would be late getting back to D.C., like I said, with all of the responsibilities up in New Jersey running for governor. But I'm pretty sure I spelled Goldman right. I don't think that's hard to do. Let me just do this Cheryl with 2 L's. There it is. Okay, and so it comes up. So I'm going to say it's Daniel Goldman, who, might just be absent because he's ill or was called away for something. God only knows what it might have been. Oh, there he is. Okay. How come he doesn't come up when I do that? Goldman, because I can see him. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm on the wrong page. I'm in the House roll call page rather than the Office of the Clerk page. So, okay. So what did we say? Goldman. And I'm going to do this again by the votes. I got to resort this thing. And, but Quigley is on the list. Cheryl is on the list. Swalwell. There you have it. So they were absent yesterday for some reason. And I guess as soon as they get back into town, someone needs to call them up and say, go sign this discharge petition. Give them the 216 that they need, and then force Mike Johnson to come up with a procedure to quash the discharge petition, which I assume is, all right, let's bring it to the floor, but send out a whip notice that says all Republicans need to vote to refer it back to committee or to table the resolution and thereby disarm it. So, okay, I guess that's the procedure awaiting us. But in order to get them, to force them to do that, we need to get Eric Swalwell and Daniel Goldman back to D.C. and hand them a pen. So if you're in their districts, call them up. I wouldn't be too mad about it or too hard on them unless, of course, they answer the phone and say, yeah, and we're not signing that discharge petition because reasons. And then we can get upset about what those reasons are. All right. So back onto other subjects here, and I'm just checking the mailbox. and looking to see what people are chattering about. Very often, I get some interesting dispatches from the promotional geniuses at the Hill and the New York Times, and they bring certain stories to light, but some of them we needed to, or we knew about and had on our radar anyway. So as between them and Instapaper, what have I got for you? Right. Well, there was news from the New York Times on the story of the court fight. And as Greg mentioned, the Harvard Crimson covered it as well. I thought I put that away for consideration too, which I guess I didn't. But we'll instead read the rather boring New York Times coverage. It's boring, but necessary. But I think just to bring you up to speed on exactly what happened and what the judge was saying. Judge rules Trump administration illegally canceled Harvard's funding. The ruling was a victory for the university in its battle with President Trump, but the judge's decision may not be the final word. That's because, of course, it can all be appealed to the higher courts and Supreme Court. And in fact, other courtroom news or judicial legal news, the tariff regime having just recently been declared, again, illegal. Trump has made another emergency appeal to the Supreme Court. So this is like his 4 billionth, far outpacing any other previous administration with the number of emergency applications, but then again has a better record with those emergency applications than he's entitled to. So of course he's going to do that. But in this case, Alan Blinder is, or unless he's Blinder, and they'll have to contact me and say so if that's the case, from the New York Times covering this case. Harvard University, perhaps you've heard of them, won a crucial legal victory in its clash with the Trump administration on Wednesday, when a federal judge said that the government had broken the law by freezing billions of dollars in research funds in the name of stamping out anti-Semitism. No one has yet, of course, explained why stopping scientific research or whatever kind of research, why stopping any sort of research would have any impact whatsoever on anti-Semitism. But the whole theory of the case brought forward by this kid lawyer who's mad at Harvard for some reason, and who was hired for the purpose of sticking it in Harvard's eye. No real explanation as to why stopping research is supposed to make people say, now we're going to change the anti-Semitism that we are totally not practicing, but definitely are at the same time. It bears no relationship. It's merely punishment. And the government under Donald Trump thinks that punishment is, motivation. The reason we're punishing them is these guys are not in alignment with the president's priorities, and everybody should be in alignment with the president's priorities. And this judge reminding everybody in the world, no, actually not a very interesting thing, the president's priorities. There are other mechanisms by which he can carry out his priorities. Perhaps there's funding, perhaps there's research he'd like to fund looking into anti-Semitism. But the idea that you can't look for miracle drugs because there were some anti-Semites on your campus when there probably weren't anyway. And to the extent that they were anti-Semites, guess what? They grew up, graduated, and now represent the government in this case. It's a very difficult story to make hang together. The ruling, though, may not be the final word on the matter, but the decision by Judge Allison D. Burroughs of the U.S. District Court in Boston was an interim rebuff of the Trump administration's campaign to remake elite higher education by force. Everyone knows the very best way to formulate higher education policy: force. Harvard's case centered on its research funding, and the university contended that the administration had compromised its First Amendment and due process rights when it sought to strip it away. The judge's decision could give Harvard new leverage in its settlement talks with the White House. Although the ruling was a milestone for Harvard, the only university to sue over the administration's targeted assault on its research funding, President Trump had vowed to appeal any decision that went against him, and eventually disappear any judges who rule against him. His administration has spent months seeking to pressure Harvard in ways beyond research money, and while Judge Burroughs' ruling may not put an end to that campaign, her opinion was a bracing rebuke. We must fight against anti-Semitism, but we equally need to protect our rights, including our right to free speech, and neither goal should nor needs to be sacrificed on the altar of the other, Judge Burroughs wrote in an 84-page ruling. Harvard is currently, even if belatedly, taking steps it needs to take to combat anti-Semitism and seems willing to do even more if need be. And again, at the heart of all of this is the very dubious accusation that people who are protesting the war in Gaza, Israel's war in Gaza, and its methods and the mass death and total chaos, and as I guess you're not even supposed to say there's still a debate about this, but there is, because people stand around and bicker over this thing, whether or not to apply the term genocide to it. But that's probably the least of the concerns of most of the protesters, although there are certainly some people for whom that's the center of their protest, using the term. But I think bringing awareness to the world of the horrific methodologies of the war is paramount for most people. That's supposed to pass for anti-Semitism because, and you all know the old trope, well, if you're criticizing Israel, whether you differentiate between the population of Israel, the government of Israel, the policies of the government of Israel, the parties who support various policies, whatever it is. Overall, there's still people running around saying if you criticize Israel, that makes you anti-Semitic because they're the only Jewish state. And, all sorts of other sub-arguments about it. Well, why aren't you criticizing the human rights records of non-Jewish states? Well, they are. So that's stupid. But you could go around in these circles for days. The point is that students getting upset about brutal conditions somewhere, anywhere, is nothing new, and it doesn't make them anti anything other than the brutality of the situation. But here you have people pretending that protesting a war being prosecuted by Israel equals anti-Semitism, and that's super dubious to begin with, and it really should have been obvious from the start. And then if you also throw in, also you can't do this chemistry research because anti-Semitism. No, too tenuous. It was tenuous enough to call it anti-Semitism to begin with. The idea of setting education policy based on this very cockeyed view of what is and isn't anti-Semitism, when we know, A, you don't care very much about anti-Semitism, and we know this because the lawyer you sent to court is one of Harvard's of late most infamous undergraduate anti-Semites. Therefore, you're probably going to lose this case. Anyway, the judge adds, now it is the job of the courts to similarly step up to act to safeguard academic freedom and freedom of speech as required by the Constitution, and to ensure that important research is not improperly subjected to arbitrary and procedurally infirm grant terminations, even if doing so risks the wrath of a government committed to its agenda no matter the cost. In fact, especially if they're committed to their agenda no matter what the cost, I would say. As a part of the decision, Judge Burroughs said the Trump administration could not issue new blockades on Harvard's federal research funding in retaliation for the exercise of its First Amendment rights or on any purported grounds of discrimination without compliance with the terms of civil rights law. The White House condemned the ruling. And how so? This time they sent out one of, I guess, their lesser-known spokespeople, Liz Houston, unless it's Huston, but Huston, to any fair-minded observer, as if you knew what they were. It is clear that Harvard University failed to protect the students from harassment and allowed discrimination to plague their campus for years. This White House spokeswoman says Harvard does not have a constitutional right to taxpayer dollars and remains ineligible for grants in the future. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. That's not what the judge says. You really have to have a more solid connection between the grant funds and the accused anti-Semitism, and you just aren't interested in even trying to show it. And so you very often will run afoul of the arbitrary and capricious thing. That's one of your big issues. She added, the spokesperson did, that the government would appeal this egregious decision and we're confident will ultimately prevail in our efforts to hold Harvard accountable. And I don't know that I disagree, because the Supreme Court generally grants you whatever you want. However, they all went to Harvard. So not all of them are Harvard, but you get the idea. Hours after the White House's statements, Harvard's president, Alan M. Garber, who's not, wasn't supposed to be the president, but they forced out the other one, said the university would continue to assess the implications of the opinion, monitor further legal developments, and be mindful of the changing landscape in which we seek to fulfill our mission. But, he said, Judge Burroughs' ruling affirms Harvard's First Amendment and procedural rights and validates our arguments in defense of the university's academic freedom, critical scientific research, and the core principles of American higher education. Judge Burroughs' decision came on the second day of classes for the new academic year, after both the government and the university asked her to issue what is known as summary judgment, a ruling on the case's claims without a trial. That's interesting. Both parties have asked for that. That's, that's interesting. Summary judgment, though, basically is a signal as well that the party moving for summary judgment believes that based on the pleadings to date, the other side, even if you take all of their pleadings at face value and give them credence, they still haven't met the threshold legally to win the case. For both parties to be making that motion is interesting, not by any means unprecedented, but they're definitely seeing the world through different eyes. And on the track record, it's the Trump administration that sees things with crazy eyes, but we keep finding out that the Supreme Court tells everybody that they've just been pre-wrong about how they've been viewing things the whole time. And when I say the whole time, I mean since the founding of the United States. Okay. Both called for summary judgment. She largely ruled for Harvard, relying on voluminous filings, a select batch of evidence, and oral arguments in her Boston courtroom on July 21st to reach that decision. Harvard brought the case in April after the Trump administration insisted that the nation's oldest university had become a wellspring of bigotry. That's just so out of keeping with what most people think of when it comes to Harvard, but okay. On April 11th, it sent the school a letter trying to condition Harvard's access to federal research money on its acquiescence to a range of demands. Those terms included audits, the establishment of a merit-based admissions and hiring policy, the shutdown of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, and an examination of programs and departments that most fuel anti-Semitic harassment or reflect ideological capture. I mean, that was the claim that the government was making. And the problem is that for people who don't live enthralled to their fantasy world, there's no examination to be made. Like, okay, I want you to examine programs and departments that most fuel anti-Semitic harassment or reflect ideological capture. And the world at large says no departments fuel anti-Semitic harassment or reflect ideological capture. That's your fantasy version of how Harvard works. Can you convince a judge that it has any merit? And the answer is, even taking your claims at face value and giving them as much credence as possible, based on the evidence and pleadings presented to date, no, you're delusional. Sorry. Although you've moved for summary judgment, we find in favor of the summary judgment motion made by Harvard here that on objective reading, and not even objective reading, on a subjective reading most favorable to each of you, they seem to have it together, and you seem to be cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Sorry. Harvard refused these demands on April 14th. Back to the article here. The administration took only hours to announce it would begin cutting off funding that Harvard, like other prominent universities, had long relied on to pay for research. The university sued a week later, accusing the government of ignoring its First Amendment protections and hastily barreling past the thicket of laws and regulations that govern how federal funding can be revoked. Right? They just pretended not to care that those existed. Instead, they made their decisions arbitrarily and capriciously, which you can't do. All told, the trade-off put to Harvard was clear. Allow the government to micromanage your viewpoints in your academic institution, or jeopardize your ability to pursue medical breakthroughs, scientific discoveries, and innovative solutions, lawyers for Harvard wrote in a court filing in June. I'm sad that they only put it in scientific terms, but that's where people's minds are these days. They added the administration's content and viewpoint-based attempt to coerce and control Harvard is blatantly unconstitutional. The Trump administration had insisted that it had the authority to cancel grants and contracts because, in its view, Harvard had not done enough to counter its made-up view of what they thought Harvard did. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm telling you, there's a little bit left to this New York Times article on the subject, and it's got some nuance that I think ought to be on the record. But as I was looking over the break at the recommended piece from the Harvard Crimson that Greg brought to our attention, I feel like that we'd probably be better served reading there. But I do want to bring a couple more things to your attention. We left off here. Maybe we just completed. I don't know. The New York Times piece here that I got to make a note here to myself so I can find my way back into what I was thinking about from the Harvard piece. Right. All told, the trade-off put to Harvard was clear. Basically allow the government to micromanage Harvard, or else you'll lose all your money. Right. So the federal grants for research. The Trump administration had insisted that it had the authority to cancel grants and contracts because, and we'll put it in the New York Times' version of it, rather than my embellished version of it, was the reason the Trump administration thought it had this authority was, in its view, Harvard had not done enough to counter what it argued was rampant campus anti-Semitism. Federal research funds, the Justice Department asserted in one of its submissions to Judge Burroughs, were not charitable gratuities. You have to live up to certain standards in order to get these funds from the government. And in this instance, the standard is you have to get rid of the campus-wide pervasive anti-Semitism, and it just wasn't there. The fact that there were protests in support of Palestine, and that there are people who believe that any protest not only against Israel in general or the Israeli government, or just being not even that, pro-Palestinian, equals anti-Semitism. And so therefore there's a pervasive, no, it wasn't pervasive anything. Lots was going on at Harvard that had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the protests. And there were plenty of students who went about their business day in and day out without ever engaging in the debate or protest or even having to acknowledge that it was there. You could certainly go out of your way to find it, but yeah, in the administration's imagining, it was impossible for a Jewish student or even a Christian student who boo-hoos over Israel all the time for whatever reason to just conduct their daily affairs because of the rampant anti-Semitism. There's all these Nazi flags flying all over the place. No, nothing like that. It's crazy. And the connection was more than, or less than tenuous. It didn't even rise to the level of tenuous. Anyway, rather the federal government, so this is the government's argument here. Federal grants aren't charitable gratuities. Rather, the government grants funds to universities through contracts that include explicit conditions, the Justice Department wrote, adding, if they fail to meet those conditions, the grants are subject to cancellation. But the administration also hoped that Judge Burroughs would not issue much of a ruling at all. Its lawyers argued that an 1887 law meant that the suit, which the Justice Department depicted as a contractual matter, needed to be heard by a specialized court in Washington. More recently, it urged the judge to consider the implications of an August decision by the Supreme Court in a different case. But as you know, by the way, this administration doesn't believe in the applicability of different cases unless they, do. In that case, which also concerned federal grants, the court ruled that challenges to individual termination should be brought in the Court of Federal Claims. But it was a muddled ruling that left the door open for policy challenges in federal district courts. Judge Burroughs acknowledged the Supreme Court's decision on Wednesday, or acknowledged that decision, and said she was endeavoring to follow it, but she largely asserted her own court's jurisdiction. The First Amendment claims here are about speech and whether the federal government is improperly infringing on the free speech rights of an academic institution and its employees, she wrote. The resolution of these claims might result in money changing hands, but what's fundamentally at issue is a bedrock constitutional principle rather than the interpretation of contract terms. And Judge Burroughs, as she said in her courtroom in July, resisted the government's efforts to tie research money to accusations of civil rights violations. Burroughs wrote on Wednesday, it's difficult to conclude anything other than the defendants used anti-Semitism as a smokescreen for a targeted, ideologically motivated assault on this country's premier universities. But Harvard leaders have privately fretted over the potential fallout of a protracted fight with the federal government, even if they won in Judge Burroughs' court, and chose months ago to start parallel settlement talks. It's just that the newspapers were covering the parallel settlement talks as the whole ball game, and they should not have been. That's what Michael Sweeney points out. That did not keep the government from intensifying its pressure campaign against the school, including by issuing cumbersome subpoenas and opening new investigations, like one focused on Harvard's patents, also having nothing to do with what their claim is the problem on campus. The New York Times reported in July that the university was open to spending $500 million to resolve the matter, but that Harvard was seeking an array of provisions to protect its independence. That ended up, of course, getting interpreted slightly differently. Although the university and administration have continued to move forward to a potential agreement, they have not reached a settlement. Trump, who has taken this special interest in the financial terms of pacts his administration has reached with universities, said last week that he wanted, quote, nothing less than $500 million from Harvard. So Harvard says, well, we would spend this much to resolve the issue. And Trump took that to mean they're offering me that amount. They're not. Some of that is going to lawyers. Some of that would be going to new programs that would hopefully keep them in compliance with the stupid demands of the federal government, but still also open for business. It wasn't, well, we'll pay you $500 million, Donald Trump, to leave us alone. That wasn't the offer. But naturally, that's the way he took it. A comment from Linda McMahon here, but who cares? She's stupid. And then I guess we get down to the bottom of, I don't know. There's not that much more to extract from the New York Times article. But let's make it the focus today. We'll do this as the in-depth thing. Why not? It's important. And then we'll see what else we have time for. Here's the Harvard Crimson coverage of it. Under the headline of Judge Hands Victory to Harvard in funding lawsuit. Ruling Trump administration's freeze unconstitutional. Mateo Diaz. Oh, he gets the credit for the picture. That's interesting. It says by, but it doesn't say photo by. But okay, thanks, Mateo, for your fabulous picture. Yeah, it's a nice one. It's a good one. Iconic, I think, of their seal on a banner on one of the administration buildings. But the writers of the piece are Dhruv Patel, Avani Rai, and Saketh Sundar. And I'm sorry, I left out your middle initials, but people wanted them in there. That's why you included them. Dhruv T. Patel, Avani B. Rai. Saketh Sundar goes without Middle initial. Okay, here's the real story. A federal judge ruled, as you know, that the Trump administration violated the Constitution when it froze more than $2.6 billion in research funding to Harvard, striking down the freeze in its entirety and delivering the university a major legal victory. That is a major victory. The judge, Allison Burroughs, as you know, also found found that the administration's freeze orders were retaliation for protected speech. That's why it doesn't, in fact, need to be in federal claims court. It's not a contract dispute. The dispute is you're using unconstitutional methods for finding us to be supposedly out of compliance with contract terms. Your contract terms themselves are unconstitutional because they demand the voluntary submission to an unconstitutional suppression of free speech. Yes, there's a contract involved, but there are also some other constitutional rights involved. Anyway, she also found that the government failed to comply with Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which requires agencies to give notice, investigation, and an opportunity to respond before terminating federal financial assistance over civil rights violations. So, some due process violations as well. Burroughs' order vacated both the freeze orders and termination notices that Harvard received in the days after it rejected sweeping demands from the Trump administration this April as violations of the First Amendment. She also handed Harvard a permanent injunction that prevents the Trump administration from reimposing unconstitutional conditions on its funding. A review of the administrative record makes it difficult to conclude anything other than that the defendants used anti-Semitism as a smokescreen for a targeted, ideologically motivated assault on this country's premier universities. Several. She wrote in her order, the standoff between Harvard and the Trump administration began in late March. I think you know the background story. We can skip that part. When Harvard rejected the conditions that the administration put forth, they responded hours later by cutting $2.2 billion in federal funding and then turned up the pressure by pulling hundreds of millions more. Harvard responded by suing, saying that the repeated cuts were retaliatory measures intended to punish the university for exercising First Amendment rights. In her order on Wednesday, Burroughs slammed the government's conditions and argued that they had little to do with combating anti-Semitism, the administration's stated justification, and everything to do with the defendants' power and political views. Burroughs also ruled that the freeze orders were arbitrary and capricious. I'm glad that finally got included in one of the reports on things, and why I think in some ways the Crimson has done a better job than the New York Times. I had to insert that into the discourse when the New York Times reported on it. Harvard knew it was important and should say so. It were arbitrary and capricious under the Administrative Procedure Act, stating that federal agencies had gathered virtually no evidence about anti-Semitism at Harvard prior to issuing them. She noted that the primary document used by the White House to argue that Harvard had let anti-Semitism run rampant, a report by an internal university task force, was published 2 weeks after the April 14th freeze. White House spokesperson Liz Houston condemned the decision. We saw that one before already. We were pained to read it even once. We won't read it twice. Trump has vowed previously on social media to immediately, all caps, appeal and win. He's vowed to win if Burroughs ruled against him, raising the prospect of a drawn-out, multi-year legal battle that could ultimately end before a Supreme Court that may have little sympathy for Harvard, because some of them did go to Yale, of course. In the meantime, absent intervention from an appeals court, agencies are required to resume ordinary processing of funds that were halted by the freezes this spring. The decision is a landmark victory for Harvard and its months-long legal standoff against the Trump administration, but it also comes as Harvard quietly continues negotiations with the White House. In recent weeks, Harvard has reportedly agreed to commit $500 million toward workforce development initiatives in exchange for winning back the $2.7 billion in frozen grants and contracts. Trump, however, for whatever reason, believes that was supposed to go to him. Interesting. But Burroughs' ruling already restores the funding, potentially giving Harvard additional leverage in its talks with the White House. The order and Harvard's federal funding lawsuit do not address the barrage of other actions that the Trump administration has slung at Harvard, including a string of investigations and repeated attempts to prevent its international students from studying in the U.S. In an email to Harvard affiliates hours after the ruling, University President Alan M. Garber, and it's the Crimson, so they say, oh, by the way, he's a 1976 graduate, praised the court's decision as a defense of higher education's core principles. As eloquent, I'm sure, as the statement is, I don't think it adds a great deal to the discourse. The highly anticipated ruling, so we'll skip it, follows requests from both Harvard and the federal government to settle the case through summary judgment. Oh, yeah, we covered that as well. Over the summer, the White House submitted more than 2,000 pages of documents related to the freeze in an effort to justify the timing and necessity of the cuts. Shortly after, Burroughs heard arguments from lawyers for both Harvard and the Trump administration in a packed hearing in a Boston courtroom. Now we get to the background of the DOJ's representation here. At that hearing, she signaled skepticism of the government's case, pressing Justice Department lawyer Michael K. Velchick, also noted here in the Harvard Crimson because he's a graduate of 2012, to explain how cutting billions in research funding advanced the White House's stated goal of combating anti-Semitism. Like, what's the relationship here? At one point, she called the White House's rationale a little bit mind-boggling. Well, it wasn't going to be explained by such a young lawyer, I guess. Well, let's see. He graduates in 2012. If he goes immediately to law school, then he graduates in 2015. So 10 years out of law school at most, which, that's not nothing. But to be senior counsel at DOJ and single-handedly handle the case like this seems, well, given that he lost on summary judgment, like something of a mistake, to say the least, on behalf of the Justice Department. But, Pam Bondi, confronted with a Harvard graduate, is probably like, well, I don't know, I feel like an idiot compared to this guy, even though you're both idiots, whatever. She has imposter syndrome, I guess, and she steps out of the way for this wackadoodle, about whom we'll learn a little bit more later, I hope, if we can get through this. Burroughs' Wednesday ruling did not spare Harvard from criticism, however. Burroughs, who is Jewish, wrote that she believes Harvard responded only belatedly to anti-Semitic discrimination. It is clear, even based solely on Harvard's own admissions, that Harvard has been plagued by anti-Semitism in recent years and could and should have done a better job of dealing with the issue, she wrote, but added that there was little connection between the research affected by the grant terminations and anti-Semitism. And I guess if you want to put it in the most favorable light to the government, there certainly were Jewish students who probably found themselves, like if they went to counter-demonstrate, found themselves under what they perceived to be attack, and maybe they even were. I don't know how badly Jewish students who conscientiously avoided the situation felt, but I don't know whether that should necessarily be the standard either. There were clearly people who were taking too much license under the umbrella of protesting the situation, and who I think came in for some considerable criticism themselves in going beyond the reasonable limitations of reasonable discourse, let's say, if there is such a thing anymore. And of course, there are definitely people who confuse and conflate issues and who might find who might find cover under the protest, the righteous protest, to go further with their own confusions into anti-Semitism. But then, what is at the heart of this lawsuit is, how does not researching pharmaceutical approaches to, or treatment approaches to certain diseases relate to students who aren't anywhere near this research being confused in their approach to protesting the Israeli government? What's the relationship here? Sorry, you just haven't submitted anything that establishes that link. And in the absence of that, we have to, and in the absence of any information that supplements it in any way, to either connects it to any of the grants that are at issue here, is totally missing. So on summary judgment, you're just going to lose. All right. Well, at any rate, the judge objected to the idea that First Amendment rights should be curbed in the interest of fighting anti-Semitism. It is important to realize and remember that if speech can be curtailed in the name of the Jewish people today, then it can just as easily the speech of Jews and anyone else can be curtailed when political winds change direction, she wrote. Burroughs was assigned to the funding case after Harvard's attorneys argued it was related to an earlier lawsuit brought by the university's chapter of the American Association of University Professors, which also challenged the funding review. She proved to be a favorable draw for Harvard. Over the past decade on the bench, Burroughs, an Obama appointee, has overseen several high-profile cases involving the university. Most notably, she sided with Harvard in a 2019 challenge to its race-conscious admissions policy, a decision later overturned by the Supreme Court in 2023. The Trump administration tried to shift the case out of Burroughs' hands to the Court of Federal Claims, whose 16-member bench has 10 Trump appointees. That's the reason they were so interested in getting there, I guess. Burroughs largely rejected the maneuver, saying that Harvard's First Amendment and Title VI arguments could not be appropriately resolved in federal claims court, though she agreed that she could not hear certain of Harvard's Administrative Procedure Act claims. So, gotten to the end of that, I thought a more informative look, both on background and in depth, in the Harvard Crimson than the New York Times. So, congratulations to them. No surprise, they're good students. But they mentioned along the way, which I found interesting, that there was no mention at all in the New York Times article, and maybe they just thought it wasn't relevant, but it is, of who was representing the Justice Department. Michael K. Velchik, Harvard undergraduate of class of 2012. And I mentioned to you that the other day that the Boston Globe had given an in-depth look to Velchik, and we couldn't get it. But remember that it was came under the headline of a DOJ lawyer accuses Harvard of indifference to anti-Semitism. As a Harvard undergrad, he wrote a paper from Hitler's perspective. The Boston Globe tells us Hillary Burns wrote the piece, but we couldn't access it. And now I'm not seeing as readily available, but let me scan again. Thought I had put aside. There we are. The New Republic decided to pick up on the story because I guess so many of us, they may have had something extra to say too, but so many of us had difficulty accessing the Boston Globe piece because, we aren't supposed to be able to because we don't subscribe and support their reporting. I support that they report, but, if I was a billionaire, I would certainly be subscribing to everything. Here's the New Republic's version of the story, which I think, is of interest and yet was largely absent from the reporting either of the New York Times or the Crimson. It's hard to shoehorn this in, but I think it belongs there. So we're going to shoehorn it in. DOJ lawyer waging war against Harvard sure seems to like Hitler. The TNR has more latitude here in saying that's their headline. If Donald Trump is so worried about anti-Semitism on university campuses, why is the lawyer representing his administration and why is this the lawyer, representing his administration in court? That gets around to posing the issue properly. Who am I reading here? Robert McCoy. Thanks, Robert, for picking up this story. On Tuesday, the Boston Globe revealed that the Justice Department lawyer pushing Donald Trump's war against Harvard University for alleged complicity in campus anti-Semitism, he once wrote a college paper from the perspective of Adolf Hitler. I don't know what the assignment was. That's true. But I bet that wasn't it. When Michael Velchik was a senior at Harvard in 2011, studying classics, because, he's total MAGA or whatever, he was assigned to write a brief paper in Latin from the perspective of, here's the assignment, from the perspective of a controversial historical or literary figure, justifying your actions and defending yourself against potential accusations. Well, this would fit the parameters of the assignment, true, but there are different levels of controversy. And it is interesting that he chose Hitler, and it was interesting that it's had to be done in Latin. So there you go. So Students should choose a classical figure such as Nero or Cleopatra, maybe somebody who might, have spoken Latin, for instance. A mythological figure such as Medea or Theseus, and or anyone from the post-classical world, whether a Shakespearean villain or a 20th century tycoon. So he had some latitude. But read the room, kid. Velchik chose Hitler. According to 3 sources of the Globe, 2 of whom had read the paper and considered it disturbing, and so likewise were able to read Latin. At Harvard in 2011, no one would say that Hitler was a controversial figure, an unnamed source says, and that's very interesting. I guess that's a good point, right? Like you could say, well, he's certainly a controversial figure. Yeah, in the sense that if you said, I like Hitler, you would be a controversial figure. There wasn't any controversy. In 2011, not much controversy about Hitler on campus. Like it was just, yeah, Hitler's Hitler. He's bad. I can't find anybody who says no. So, I don't know. It's an interesting technical challenge to the rubric, to say the least. The instructor, dismayed, reportedly had Velchik redo the assignment. Fast forward 18 months when Velchik was getting ready to matriculate at Harvard Law School. And I guess just pause here for a second. Here's, I guess, at least one of the roots of Velchik's fight with Harvard. They made me redo my paper because I was using Hitler. Now I'm mad. What happened to my freedom of speech is probably what he was saying. Fast forward 18 months when Velchik was getting ready to matriculate at Harvard Law School, and per the Globe, he told a peer that Hitler's manifesto, Mein Kampf, was his favorite book that he'd read that year. Is it bad that my favorite class at Harvard was Nietzsche, and my favorite book I've read this year is Mein Kampf, he wrote in a June 2013 email? The answer, sir, is yes, it is bad, but you're just being coy about it. After starting at Harvard Law School, Velchik offered additional thoughts on Hitler's book in another email to a peer, sharing quick reviews of 76 books he'd recently read. He called Mein Kampf fascinating. You're so edgy, man. You're an edgelord. And wrote of its author, he certainly excelled as an orator, and his writing reflects oratory, understands the importance of propaganda, thought that the timing of a speech was important, better late at night. What an insight to Hitler's genius mind. Velchik omitted to mention Hitler's responsibility for the Holocaust. And he wasn't as impressed with other books he'd been with, as he'd been with Mein Kampf. Velchik was critical of Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, which he said reminded him of why he didn't, quote, usually read books written by women. What a winner. He seems like a fairly nice guy, I'm sure. So anyway, just pointing out, I'm sure there's more to it, but thankfully it's a truncated article and we don't have much more time anyway. Just sort of letting you know what kind of milady type 4chan guy he is. He's, I guess, still harboring resentment at having to redo his Hitler paper. And so only too excited to volunteer for the task of suing Harvard. I know we've read something else in the background as well about the various people who are contributing in other ways to the case. And I think also about this guy Velchik just basically bearing a grudge and then basically the outgrowth of that in my own thinking about this case and the case against the other universities and institutions that the Trump administration is taking on, they're hitching their own personal revenge wagons to Donald Trump's star. He's going to be everybody's revenge, and he's going to give you the capacity to exact your own revenge. And that's manifested itself on social media for me in encapsulating what I think is now the MAGA, like the favored MAGA job interview technique, right? Your favorite answer, you got to prepare ahead of time on job interviews. You know, what's your greatest weakness? Oh, I'm a workaholic. Where do you see yourselves in 5 years? You know, and you got to have some sort of, vision for I've saved the company $1 million because of my genius or something like that. Something that involves the company and your view of yourself in 5 years. Anyway, I think the new hot answer for MAGA applicants is, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Well, I'll tell you, Bob, like just being ridiculously informal, and put the interviewer in their place right off the bat, right? Where do you see yourselves in where do I see myself in 5 years? Either as CEO of this crap hole. What? How dare you? Or, we'll never hire you now, right? Or I see myself in the administration, in the Department of Justice, suing your ass for employment discrimination. How dare you not hire me, even though I just threatened you right out of the gate. I mean, I think that's their approach to things. Or, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Well, either here or living off the settlement that I win from you for employment discrimination, or inside the administration suing you for employment discrimination, or whatever, right? Where do you see yourself now in 5 years, Mr. Harvard graduate? Well, I'll tell you what, it's suing you over the time I got a B on a paper or had to redo an assignment because I made it about Hitler. And, therefore, it's how interesting is that? This rampant anti-Semitism on campus has to be stopped. What anti-Semitism? The anti-Semitism that made me redo my Hitler paper. I think you might have a weird idea of what anti-Semitism is, kid. But there you have it. Senior counsel at the Justice Department and solely representing the government in a landmark case against Harvard University, 10 years out of law school. What a record. Well, some people can do a lot in 10 years. Michael Velchik hasn't, but, what can you do? These people are hiring just about anybody. Speaking of which, I guess we got tomorrow to get to. Maybe I'm making a promise I can't deliver on. Laura Loomer is somehow secretly running the government as well. That continues. There are too many Laura Loomers, Mr. President. Please eliminate 3. I am not a crackpot. Time now, though, to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy.
NetRootsRadio.com.
On NetRootsRadio.com.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Oh no, here we go again. Tulsi Gabbard's reckless outing of a CIA officer has exposed the staggering incompetence of this administration again. And on the rest of the menu, Oregon, Washington, and California in that new public health partnership aimed at preserving access to vaccines that Greg mentioned at the outset. We'll see you tomorrow.